Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host. Of revolution. We got a World War III update. Before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all.
Russian forces launched a large-scale attack that lasted throughout the night and into the morning of August 22, 2026, a total of 11 hours, targeting facilities in the Odessa region. According to monitoring and tracking reports, the region was attacked using a combination of 17 new Banderol-type cruise missiles, 4 Kh-59 and Kh-31 missiles, and approximately 10 FAB aerial bombs launched from Su-34 fighter jets over the Black Sea. This was supplemented by approximately 70 Geran drones, most of which were jet-powered. Another 20 drones were launched from Gaberdskoye, Russia. Footage shows a genuine aerial battle between the drones and Ukrainian Yak-52 in the skies over Odessa, where Russian reconnaissance targeting drone operators performed aerial maneuvers to evade pursuit attempts. These drones helped guide the attack drones to their final targets. Monitoring sources reported the target, which is also included in the list of targets announced by the Russian military. Military equipment storage depots and fuel tanks, serving Ukrainian troops at the ports of Chernomorsk and Yuzhny were targeted. The Rozdilna train station sustained severe damage, resulting in the disruption of electricity and water supplies. Another attack struck a power substation in Sobinyan, causing a massive fire. Russia is known to be intensifying its attacks on Ukrainian territory, at a time when the enemy's air defenses are running out of Patriot missiles, and are barely able to defend against ballistic missiles. Ukrainian observers believe that Zelensky's escalation of total war continues to devastate Ukraine, and that it was unwise of officials in Kiev to attack the Russian Wildberries warehouse.
My dear truth seekers, a few hours ago, details emerged about the devastating Russian missile strike on Kiev. As it turned out, the Russian military launched missiles at the Ukrainian capital in several salvos. The first salvo took place immediately after midnight. It is reliably known that within 15 minutes, Kiev was hit by a barrage of 8 Iskander-M ballistic missiles, 13 Zircon hypersonic missiles, and 2 North Korean KN-23 ballistic missiles. 10 minutes later, Russian warships launched about 30-caliber cruise missiles towards Kiev, directly from the Black Sea. Later, about 20 Russian strategic bombers took to the skies and launched dozens of Kh-101 cruise missiles towards Kiev. According to numerous sources, in total, more than 70 missiles of various types rained down on the Ukrainian capital. At the same time, it is worth noting that hundreds of Russian kamikaze drones also took part in this attack. My friends, against this backdrop, I would like to draw your attention to one very interesting fact. The fact is that an hour before the devastating missile strike on Kiev, Vladimir Putin spoke at a meeting of the Council for Strategic Development and National Projects. During his speech, Putin stated that various factors, including external pressure and drone attacks by the Kiev regime, are affecting Russia's economic indicators. The Russian economy is not experiencing critical consequences from Ukrainian drone attacks. Nevertheless, these attacks unquestionably inflict some damage upon Russia. I want to reiterate the need to strengthen Russia's sovereignty and increase efficiency both in the defense and security sector and in the socio-economic sphere, Vladimir Putin said. It is noteworthy that 60 minutes after Putin's words, the Russian army launched more than 70 missiles and over 100 kamikaze drones towards Kiev. This time, Western air defense systems once again failed to shoot down even a single missile. As a result, all the intended targets were successfully hit. In particular, independent monitoring services have recorded the destruction of dozens of warehouses belonging to companies such as Fazi Group, Rosetka, Sanpark, and Nova Poshta. In addition, Russian missiles and drones also hit logistics centers belonging to companies such as Epicenter, Zamler Group, Navas, Edelon, FM Logistic, and EVA. Furthermore, numerous explosions were also recorded at factories such as Mayak, Radiometer, Kiev Arsenal, and Kiev Priber. And here is where the fun begins. When Ukrainian firefighters were trying to extinguish fires at strategic facilities in the central and northern parts of Kiev, 5 Zircon hypersonic missiles, 3 Iskander ballistic missiles, 2 North Korean Kn-23 ballistic missiles, and 20 caliber cruise missiles simultaneously struck the Antonov aircraft factory in the Svyatoshinsky district of Kiev. According to numerous witnesses, the missile strike was so powerful that a giant 1,000-foot mushroom cloud fireball erupted over the plant. My dear truth seekers, the fact that Russia used such a large number of powerful missiles against the Antonov aircraft factory indicates that this particular facility was a priority target for the Russian command. Moreover, on the morning of August 21st, the coordinator of the Russian underground in Ukraine, Sergei Lebedev, stated that dozens of foreign engineers from NATO countries, who participated in the assembly and production of various types of unmanned aerial vehicles, were killed in this strike. In addition, premises converted into a hotel for instructors from NATO countries were also destroyed on the factory grounds. In total, during this Russian missile strike on the Antonov aircraft factory, dozens of workshops, warehouses, and underground facilities were destroyed, along with 30 engineers and military instructors from NATO countries. These were mainly Polish, German, and French citizens. Against this backdrop, I would also like to draw your attention to an interesting statement by the authoritative political scientist Marat Bashirov. In particular, he stated that during the recent missile strikes on Ukraine, Russia is destroying not only Ukrainian factories and logistics centers, but also facilities belonging to American companies. For example, in Kiev alone, virtually all facilities owned by American companies such as DuPont, Monsanto, and Cargill were destroyed. As it turns out, 40% of the agricultural land in Ukraine is controlled by American companies. Simply put, 40% of Ukraine's harvest belongs to the West. However, due to Russia's naval blockade of Odessa and the constant missile strikes on Kiev, American corporations began to suffer huge financial losses. Well, my friends, it seems Vladimir Putin was really angry with Donald Trump, and took revenge on the US president for the betrayal of the spirit of Anchorage. Meanwhile, war correspondents made a rather shocking statement. In particular, they stated that the ongoing Russian naval blockade of Ukrainian seaports and the continuous Russian missile strikes on the logistics chains of the Ukrainian army and NATO forces have led to Ukrainian army units experiencing enormous difficulties in delivering not only weapon systems, but also food supplies. Against this backdrop, war correspondents have confirmed that 80% of Ukrainian army units are already experiencing real hunger. According to them, Ukrainian soldiers were left not only without food, but also without drinking water. As a result, Ukrainian soldiers have to drink rainwater and hunt rodents to survive somehow. Against this backdrop, dozens of videos are appearing on social media, in which Ukrainian soldiers are literally begging Zelensky to provide them with food and water. However, Ukrainian and Western media do not publish such videos, continuing to convince the public that the Ukrainian army is allegedly one step away from victory. In this context, the motivation of Ukrainian soldiers continues to decline rapidly, while the number of deserters in the Ukrainian army has already exceeded 300,000 people. Amid this, the number of Ukrainian soldiers who have decided to defect to the Russian army is also growing rapidly. For example, since January 2016, more than 50 Ukrainian soldiers have defected to Russia. In total, according to open sources, more than 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers are fighting on the side of the Russian army. At the same time, it is reported that this figure is significantly understated, as Russia is concealing the names of many Ukrainian soldiers and officers, in order not to put their families at risk, as they are located in territory that is still under the control of the Kiev regime. Thus, it becomes clear that the days of Zelensky and his entourage are numbered, and that Ukraine will soon rid itself of the pro-Western puppets in Kiev.
Turkey has significantly increased its military presence in Syria, amid rising tensions following Israeli latest airstrikes in the country, which have once again brought Syrian southern border into focus. According to information provided by a Syrian journalist, the Turkish military has deployed approximately 200 to 250 armed vehicles as well as 20 tanks to Syrian southwestern border. A new convoy has entered the Afrin countryside. Sources in the area report that a convoy of about 20 Turkish vehicles, loaded with armored vehicles and logistical supplies, entered the area on the morning of August 20, 2026, from Turkish territory via Hamam village border crossing toward Jindir's countryside. This comes amid visible military activity and a continuing flow of military vehicles and supplies in the area. Turkish military buildup over the past 2 days has drawn attention, because it came after Israeli latest airstrikes in Syria. On August 18, Israeli fighter jets launched 8 strikes on the Abu al-Duhur military airfield in Idlib countryside. Satellite imagery showed that at least 4 airstrikes were detected on the base's runway. Israel claims that these strikes were triggered by Syrian impending approval of the deployment of Turkish troops to the base. Turkey has categorically denied Israeli allegations, with the Turkish Presidential Communications Directorate clearly stating that the baseless allegations put forward by the Israeli Prime Minister's office are intended to legitimize Israeli illegal airstrikes on Syrian sovereignty and territorial integrity. The movements of several Turkish convoys took place during a period of ongoing military activity in the Afrin region and the surrounding countryside, raising questions about the nature of the tasks assigned to these reinforcements, as well as the ultimate destination of the vehicles and supplies entering the area. If these claims are verified, the deployment would indicate that Turkish forces in Syria have been significantly reinforced in terms of armored units, or whether they will be attacked again.
Stories that I've been posting across my social media platforms that includes reports of wider use of North Korean KN-23 ballistic missiles. I will talk about that. Another organization in China has successfully launched the first stage of an orbital rocket system. This is huge news, as well as these reports of Israel allegedly striking targets inside Syria. I'm going to talk about all three of these things. So let's start with the Israeli strike on a Syrian airbase. And I explained how this is all part of perception management. Now, here you have Al Jazeera, and you need to remember that Al Jazeera is Qatari state media, and Qatar is one of the proxies the US maintains across West Asia. It hosts a huge US military presence there, and it cooperates and collaborates with the US in all of its wars, proxy wars, and other interference across the region, and has done so for years and years. So keep that in mind when you read Al Jazeera. Syrian airbase attack is an Israeli message to Damascus and Ankara. Analysts say the attack on Abu al-Duhar was likely an Israeli message warning to not rebuild Syria's air force. And you have to ask yourself, when the US and Israel, or the US through Israel, is actually attacking another nation, like say Lebanon, or Gaza, Palestine, and Gaza specifically, or Iran, or Syria during the actual US-backed proxy war against Syria, do we remember Israel sending messages to anybody? And the answer is no. They carried out strikes meant to change the military, tactical, strategic situation on the ground. They were fighting to dismantle and destroy a targeted nation. And so Israel suddenly carrying out a symbolic strike should tell you everything you need to know about this story. And so this is what I explain in this post. Israeli strikes on Syria are designed to manage regional public perception ahead of the regional use of US-backed terrorists now controlling Syria. The United States overthrew the Syrian government in late 2024. They installed a client regime headed by the actual terrorists that the US had been arming and backing to overthrow the Syrian government since at least 2011. And the US is already using Syria to disrupt logistics from Iran to Hezbollah that had been running through Syria to Lebanon. They have already been using them for this purpose, and they would seek to use them further still. We've heard these terrorists organizing along the Syrian border with Lebanon. And of course, Syria shares a long border with Iraq and has been involved in cross-border operations into Iraq. And in order to use Syria against Iran and its regional allies, especially Hezbollah in Lebanon, and to create regional support for Syria in the process, the reality of Syria being a proxy alongside Israel must be minimized. Striking an airport creates negligible damage, but to the uninformed public, looks like Israel is trying to prevent Syria from building an air force. And Qatari state media, like Al Jazeera, is there to reinforce this false narrative, Qatar itself being a U.S. proxy alongside both Israel and Syria's current regime. Imagine if these terrorists that are now running most of Syria, imagine if they were to rush into Lebanon and begin fighting Hezbollah, basically side by side with Israel, and all of this being enabled by the United States. Imagine how that would look. Imagine the rank and file of these extremists in Syria who make up the new government and the new military. Imagine what might be going through their minds. So you carry out these strikes on airports. People don't understand. You can strike an airport very severely, and within hours, the holes in the runways can be patched up, and everything could be back to normal very, very quickly. And just look at Ukraine. Russia launching thousands of missiles and drones into Ukraine every single year, including targeting airports, and yet Ukraine still maintains at least some air capabilities because it is very, very difficult to permanently knock out an air base. And so please keep that in mind. When they're striking air bases and they just do it one time, that is entirely symbolic. There's nothing that they would achieve strategically by just striking one air base one time. This is for perception management. This is in the hopes that the vast majority of the public have no clue how any of this works, and it sounds like a much bigger deal than it actually was. Likewise, the U.S. condemning the Israeli strikes. Okay, so we have this from Al Jazeera. Syrian air base attack is an Israeli message to Damascus and Ankara. And then we have this from German state media. Syria and the U.S. condemn Israeli strikes on military base. Now, remember, absolutely everything Israel does is done because the U.S. has enabled it. Not just by giving them all of their aircraft, all of their munitions, all of the spare parts that they use, but also all the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance that Israel uses to carry out attacks all across the region. This all comes from the United States, and without which Israel would not be able to do any of this. Again, people need to remember, Israel has a smaller population than just New York City alone. It was created and it is propped up every single day, year to year, by the U.S. And without that huge amount of U.S. support, Israel would not exist as it does today. So no, Israel's not just doing whatever they feel like without the U.S. completely approving of it and also completely enabling it. And again, this goes all the way back to 2009 U.S. policy papers like this Brookings Institution paper, Which Path to Persia, which has an entire chapter titled Leave It to Bibi, Allowing or Encouraging an Israeli Military Strike. And the whole purpose of using Israel for these type of operations is to make it look like Israel did it, and for Israel to attract all of the blame, all of the retaliation, and allow the U.S. to solely reap the benefits of whatever policies are being advanced by this aggression. So the U.S. condemning the Israeli strikes helps create the illusion of friction and distance between the U.S. and its Israeli proxies to generate plausible deniability, despite Israeli warplanes, bombs, and ISR all coming from the U.S. itself. Think about Syria sending troops into Lebanon to fight Hezbollah. This is just one of many ways Syria can be used in this wider war the U.S. is waging across West Asia and against both Iran and its network of alliances in the region. That's just one of several possibilities. These terrorists in Syria are already interdicting supplies coming from Iran going to Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is already happening. So think about Syria more openly engaging in this regional conflict on the side of the U.S. and alongside U.S. proxies like Israel, when the whole region sees Hezbollah fighting Israel in Lebanon and sees Iran striking at Israel as well, or into Iraq, or even just simply cutting supply lines across Syria to Hezbollah and other regional groups actually visibly resisting the U.S. and its proxies, including Israel. It would blatantly look like Syria's U.S.-installed regime was rushing to Israel and ultimately to Washington's aid. That's exactly what it would be. So by play acting some sort of Israeli-Syrian conflict, this perception can be minimized. You're not going to eliminate it. People are still going to understand what is going on. But the vast majority of people out there are extremely emotional when it comes to Israel, and anything Israel does, people will not think rationally, logically. They will not zoom out from the region. They will simply see Israel attacking Syria. They will say, I hate Israel. Israel attacks Syria. I support Syria. That's the equation that the U.S. knows is going to run through the vast majority of people's minds, not just across West Asia, but around the world. And that is why they do things like this. So a single attack on a single airbase, or even a handful of targets across the region, one-off strikes that achieve nothing strategically. This is for perception management. People need to wise up and start recognizing this. If you don't want to read these policy papers in detail and see how it actually all does work, at least try to think logically about these type of attacks that are not going to do any serious material damage to Syria or its capabilities, but are going to play a major role in shaping perception in the region through the media. The U.S. and its proxies absolutely still dominate across the region. So that is that. And keep an eye out for more of this as events continue to unfold. The U.S. is going to continue to mobilize all of its proxies and resources across the region to continuously shape this conflict that it is fighting, not just against Iran, but again, across all of West Asia, primarily to reduce energy exports from the region, to create a global economic crisis. Remember, the U.S. knows it cannot match multipolarism, its rise. It cannot even match just China alone. So what it's trying to do is topple the whole board over. And wouldn't you know, there's a picture of someone toppling a game board over, sending all the pieces flying. And this is my latest article at New Eastern Outlook. U.S. war on multipolarism, turning the game board over. I'm going to do a whole video on this, reading the article and going into detail. I published the entire article here because Neo articles are censored on X, just like they were under Twitter through the State Department. In case anyone still thinks X somehow is any different than Twitter, it is not. And because many people cannot access Neo articles in their country because all across the West, they have been blocked. The link to Neo has been blocked. So the whole article is here. I will put the link in the video description below. Next, this was August 19th. I'm recording this August 21st. China lands another rocket after last month's Long March 10B success. So this is the WW3. This is actually a private company that is working, I would say, adjacent to it, along with the state-owned enterprises pushing forward China's space program. This is a rocket very similar to SpaceX's Falcon 9, although it utilizes different construction materials, different types of engine, different fuel. However, it does use grid fins, and it does use legs that deploy right before the landing to perform landings on land, unlike the Long March 10B, which last month landed at sea using a cable net system on a ship, on board a ship. And so this is now two organizations in China, a state-owned enterprise and a private company. They're all working together, more or less. Now China has two launch systems that can put, and now have put, payloads into orbit that can recover the first stage, which will create the ability for China to radically expand its annual launch cadence. It will match American launch cadence, then it will completely exceed America's launch cadence. As I've explained in a video, a previous video, this one about the successful landing of the Long March 10B first stage last month, I talked about how being able to launch large numbers of rockets into space every single year gives a nation an advantage. The US so far launches far more rockets into space than both China and Russia combined. But with reusability, China is going to be able to match that. And what they're going to be able to do with that is to put up large satellite constellations like Starlink, Starshield, with both civilian and military applications. They will be able to, in the event of orbital warfare, they will be able to not only target US assets in orbit more frequently, being able to launch more assets to do so. They will also be able to replace their own assets quicker than the US will be able to. So this is another metric the US had the advantage in that China is now closing the gap regarding and will inevitably surpass the US. And now finally, I want to talk about reported use of North Korean KN-23 ballistic missiles by Russia in Ukraine as part of Russia's special military operation. You can see a video here of not one, but two alleged KN-23 ballistic missiles hitting a target. It's very hard to tell from these distances, but at least the missiles have landed in the same general area. We can't tell how close they were to each other, what they were targeting by a video like this. Here you can see a picture, an approximation of what one of these launchers would look like. It's like the Russian Iskander ballistic missile launcher that carries two missiles. They launch these ballistic missiles. The Iskander has a 500-kilometer range. The KN-23 has a 900, up to a 900-kilometer range. But this isn't just about the use of this missile. Okay, we've heard stories where the US accused Russia of using Iranian drones and then North Korean weapons, and Russia had denied it or would refuse to make a statement about it. But then it would become common knowledge accepted by both sides that yes, Russia is using these systems. And so we cannot say for certain, based on either Western or Russian statements, whether this is true. We just are looking at the evidence. There is a growing body of evidence suggesting that much longer range ballistic missiles are being used, and one of the possibilities could be KN-23 North Korean missiles being transferred to Russia for Russia's use. We've also heard stories of North Korea passing along artillery shells and other types of arms and ammunition. And what I'm pointing out in this post is that if all of this is true and it is happening at the scale we are being told that it is happening at, then this indicates Chinese support for Russia. A lot of people, I see them complaining, why doesn't China do more? Why aren't they arming Russia? And people have to understand there's a very delicate balancing act taking place. I'm going to point out in this article, when I read it and do the video on it, there is a transition taking place from US-led unipolarism to Chinese, Russian, Iranian, BRICS-led multipolarism. They are trying to make this transition. The multipolar world is trying to make this transition as peacefully and as organized as possible. The US is trying to disrupt it as much as possible. So this is the reason why China does not want to just openly back and arm Russia and push the US into a corner. They want to do it gradually. They want to do it by maintaining as much of a relationship with the US as possible and drawing it out for as long as possible, forcing the US itself to cut off and essentially decouple from China. And they want to stretch this out for as long as possible. Yes, to a degree, it benefits the US, but also benefits China. It also benefits a more organized transition from unipolarism to multipolarism. So getting back to the missiles, if Russia is actually receiving large numbers of KN-23 ballistic missiles from North Korea, these are larger, longer-range versions of Russia's own Iskander ballistic missile. It tells us much about the present and possible future of China's involvement in pushing back against US wars and proxy wars. China is definitely aware of all of this, and they're definitely doing things about it, even if it's not doing it as openly as people would like. Number one, North Korea is receiving significant economic support from China despite US sanctions, making all industry, including military industrial production, viable. People continuously forget the lifeline China has extended to both North Korea and Iran, enabling these countries to continue moving forward economically, in terms of military power, in terms of maintaining social stability at home, to avoid the US being able to destabilize and collapse these countries. China is playing a central role in doing this, in sustaining these countries economically. And by doing so, they are enabling either one of these nations' military industrial bases. Whether China has a direct role doing that or not, Their economic support is making this possible. So please keep that in mind. China is providing significant industrial inputs, making the production of arms and ammunition going to Russia possible. So they might not be making the missiles and sending them to North Korea or Iran themselves, but they will send dual-use industrial machinery that could be used in civilian production or military industrial production. And of course, a lot of it will end up being used for military industrial production, making this type of production possible, making the production of KN-23 ballistic missiles possible, and doing so on a large scale. So far, China is limiting what it is doing to maintain the illusion of plausible deniability and to avoid rapid escalation. Again, the name of this game is making the transition from unipolarism to multipolarism as peacefully and as stable as possible to minimize as much damage as possible. People will say, well, look at what the US is doing through Israel in Gaza, or look at what they're doing to Iran, or look what they've done to these other countries, look what they've done to Venezuela. It can get a lot worse. Trust me, it can get much, much worse. You have to look at the big picture and long term and see, yes, maybe we could intervene more aggressively to say save Venezuela.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Vincent Brown Scott for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate your love, family. Salute.
Or to stop what's going on in Gaza. But to do so would escalate conflict and spark war regionally, perhaps even globally, at the cost of many times more lives. People have to start thinking in these much broader spectrums than just this narrow cause that you are personally invested in. Nobody wants to see anyone anywhere suffering. But if you have to pick between a handful of countries suffering during this transition or the entire planet suffering during this transition, which would you pick? And we could have a whole moral debate about that. But I think it is logical to try to minimize the damage and localize it as much as possible. So far, China is maintaining the illusion of plausible deniability and avoiding rapid escalation. Imagine what will happen if or when, I would say it's more of a question of when the US crosses the line and China no longer cares. Who knows how it is boosting the military capabilities of its partners. So imagine if China no longer cared what anyone thought about it passing military industrial capabilities, or even just sending weapons, arms, and ammunition to, say, North Korea or Iran or Russia. Imagine how much worse this could all be for the US. And I think the US understands that. And I think it is creating a certain level of deterrence for the US. The US wants to do its salami slicing strategy, and it's hoping that it can advance it to its own benefit faster than China can manage this transition from unipolarism to multipolarism. Only time is going to tell who succeeds in all of this. That was the final post. I actually have two articles that I need to get to. This one on the US war on multipolarism, turning the game board over, and also this one about Anduril hyperscaling, the worst of America's military-industrial complex. We've been hearing a lot about US military-industrial production expanding, and I want to talk about the reality and also the myths being mixed in with that conversation. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. At the bottom of every video, you have space where you can like and share, and there should be an option to subscribe.
The attack is coming on Iranian economy, and today there was an interview with the head of National Security Council in Iran, Mohsen Rezai, in which he said Trump wants to start a new game called economic warfare, and we will hold him accountable. And he mentioned the countries surrounding Iran, basically all the countries. Is if the countries surrounding Iran join the United States in an economic war against us, we will harm their interests. We will first warn them, and if they continue, we will target their interests. If the economic siege continues, we will target America.
Revolutionary salute to Catherine Smith for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, Queen.
American economic entities in the region. Here he's coming out and mentioning it's not going to be the policy as it was mentioned before by him, as it's going to be an offensive. It's not going to be defensive, and they're going to go after all they have. They say not a drop of oil would get out of the region, because he says that right now is we are restricting, we are somehow controlling the Strait of Hormuz. But if something happens, if they cooperate with the United States, they're going to hit all these pipelines. He didn't say that, but the outcome of what he said, the meaning of what he said is this. They're going to hit all of these infrastructures in the region. And the other point is that if they hold any meeting with anti-Iran groups in the region, we'll strike there as well. Basically talking about Iraqi Kurdistan or somewhere in the region. And currently, we have only restricted the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, but in the event of an economic war, we will not allow any oil to leave the Persian Gulf, even through other means. And Iran reached an agreement with Oman regarding a route through the Strait of Hormuz, which is in the middle ground, which is in the middle ground, in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz. Larry is just gone. He's going to get back. And only on paper, the Strait of Hormuz will only open and when the Americans fulfill their commitments. So this is what's going on. He's basically talking about they have defined a route. You have the Strait of Hormuz. In the middle of the strait, they have defined that route in going in and getting out of the strait. And they're getting prepared to respond to the economic warfare that the United States has prepared itself.
Sorry, you disappeared on me. Just went dead. Came back alive. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This is what's going on, Larry. And you see a new policy. He said that we've learned a lot since the war started in June 2025. And it's going to be all about it's all about going on offensive, not being on defensive as it was before the war started. So where are we going, in your opinion?
Well, we're right now, we're going to continue the trend of lack of global supply of oil. And we'll continue with the United States unable to force a change in the Iranian government. We're going to continue with the United States being unable to do anything militarily to weaken Iran. Now, as far as Iran going on the offensive, I'm not sure there's a lot that they can do. I mean, I think a lot of this is tough talk. I think the more substantive issue is what does the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia do in response to the U.S. Sanctions? If they go along with it, then they're making themselves targets. And I think Iran will hit them, which will further aggravate and depress the global economy, which will further hurt the Western economy. So, the United States is not in a strong position right now economically. And that's why you sort of see this desperation on the part of Besant and some of the hysterical comments coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. So this, what was interesting yesterday, I think Besant said specifically that the war was not going to go kinetic again. So They're planning to wage economic warfare. Now, there have been comments out of Iran saying, "Oh well, we can last to November." Well, if the United States hears that, they may try to, they'll try to last till December. Saying, okay, if November's the drop dead date for Iran, we just last to December, we win. So, I think those comments by Iran are foolish to put those out in public like that.
Yeah, but when he says the war would not go kinetic, it means that before the midterm elections or even after the midterm election, they're not considering to go on offensive.
I think for right now,
Mm-hmm.
Who knows how long that implies? But I just say, that's what he said the other day. He didn't put a timeline on it. Did you hear him say? Did you hear him say that or not?
Yeah, I heard him saying that. Yeah. And the other point is, Larry, Axios reported that they're claiming that 40 oil tankers had crossed, the Strait of Hormuz, 60 million barrels, and it was.
Well, that's great, man. That's terrific. Then the global shortage of oil is over. Everything's super, super great. No need for sanctions, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's so much bullshit out there. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, get your story, to the West. Get your story straight. Can't be both. Either, the Strait of Hormuz is wide open and oil is flowing freely, or we got to punish Iran because Iran's keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. Which is it?
Yeah. What was reported by Kelper's tracking data, it said that only 7 vessels were visible on Thursday, but satellite data also showed that no tankers traveled from the west to east on Friday, and no oil was transported out through the routes on that day. This is part of, I think what they're doing, they're trying to manipulate the market by these sort of announcements. I don't know how the market will react.
Really? You think so? Gee, what would make you think they're trying to manipulate the market? Good God. What are you, a conspiracy theorist? Okay, I'm sorry with the sarcasm.
Yeah. But this is the play that they're doing, Larry. I don't know. You mentioned, do you think that these GCC countries, how do you see the way that they're under pressure and the war put them on, the economies are, today we had a report on Financial Times. It says that the economy of Qatar, shrunk by 8.6%. And the budget of the government in Qatar was reduced by 35%. The foreign fund they had before, it's reduced by 85%. It shows how the economy, for example, in a country like Qatar is functioning at this particular moment. How are they going to cooperate with the United States with the current situation they're in? It's not.
Why do they have to cope with the United States? They have to figure out, are they going to continue to cooperate with the United States, or are they going to strike up and form a commercial and political, diplomatic, economic, military relationship with Iran? That's what they need to decide. Which team are they going to play for? Team America or Team Gulf?
Let's assume the United States wants some sort of cooperation on the part of the GCC countries. What can they do for the United States? Because as long as I know, there is no economic ties or relationship between Iran or any of these countries in the Persian Gulf.
Well, there is between Iran and the UAE were like number 2, number 3 trading partners.
But they
So
cut it just 2 days ago.
Well, yeah, UAE cut it off then, but I think Iran had already started separating itself from UAE. So apart from that, then no countries in the Gulf are, have significant economic ties to Iran. So, they can say, "Oh yeah, we'll enforce the sanctions," which is a meaningless act because what are they, enforcing against? But where they allow their territory to be used for launching military operations against Iran, that will be a drop dead issue for as far as Iran is concerned.
What are they getting after all from this conflict? I think that they're asking themselves right now, what is in this for them?
Well,
To
nothing.
continue.
You mean the Gulf Arabs?
The GCC countries, yeah.
Nothing. This is not a moneymaker for them by any stretch.
How do you compare, Larry, the situation today? It was mentioned by the head of National Security Council of Iran. He was comparing what it was before and what it is today, the situation in the region. How do you compare it? The way it was before and the way that the United States could have put, they could have put pressure on GCC countries to cooperate with them militarily and economically. But today is somehow different. How do you see the difference between then and now?
Then they had bases. Now they don't. I mean, the bases are still there in theory, but they're not there in fact. With people operating and military flights coming in and out, and what this war has done is exposed the weakness, inability of the United States to protect themselves, much less the host government.
He mentioned the defense pact between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. He said the main reason is that the United States is not anymore, that dominant power in the region. So you see the new alliances are growing, are shaping in the region. And
I mean, look, the United States made a deal with all these countries. Hey, you buy our bonds, you buy our military equipment, you allow us to be based here, we'll protect you. We got your back. Iran won't dare attack you while we're here. The country said, okay, that sounds like a good deal. So they allowed the United States in. The United States has this presence throughout. Next thing you know, they're getting the hell bombed out of it. And, when they go back to the United States, they say, what the hell? Where was our support? So, what this has done is discredited the United States. The United States is, if you will, lost face, which is sort of a Chinese thing, but, still losing face is losing face.
I assume China is winning a lot, Larry, in whatever is happening in the West Asia, because China is the alternative for all these countries in the region, not only for Iran and for Pakistan, for Turkey, for the whole. I would argue even GCC countries they have started thinking about it seriously. And how do you see the role of China? How China can somehow make new partnerships in the region?
Well, China's already made new partnerships. So we reported on the transition protocol yesterday, Pepe did, that China has given Pakistan guarantees. So Pakistan right now is vulnerable to pressure from the United States. It needs a $10 billion IMF loan. And the United States is basically suggesting it's going to weigh in until the IMF to tell Pakistan to go pound sand. They don't get it. And China apparently has told Pakistan, "Don't worry, we got you covered." So I think China and Russia recognize that the United States is under tremendous economic pressure right now. Scott Bessent's lost control of the bond market. He's lost control of the ability to control the price of the U.S. dollar, to sell U.S. bonds to foreign governments, and so he's in a pretty desperate situation. And I think China and Russia recognize that, and they're just going to continue heaping the pressure on. And in the course of that, they can, protecting Pakistan is peanuts as far as China is concerned.
How do you see the way that China and the United States are playing the game in Pakistan? Who's going to have the upper hand in a long run, in your opinion?
What, you mean between the United States and Pakistan?
Yeah, the United States and China, and they're playing their leverages in Pakistan. Yeah,
no, I think clearly it's going to be China. China's playing the long game here. They understand what's at stake. So, but they're not going to go public and get into a public pissing match with the United States beyond what the foreign minister spokesman said, like yesterday, which we strongly disagree with these sanctions. We're not in favor. And there have been some analysts trying to suggest, well, maybe China's going to go along with the U.S. sanctions. I go, what is it about no that you don't understand? They say they reject the sanctions. If they reject it, it means they're not going to follow them or apply them. So, China, sort of the other dimension here, though, is Pakistan is still a nuclear power and has to be taken seriously. And then the word continues to circulate in Iran that the legislature is. So what's the name of the legislature? What's it called? Majlis. Okay, the Majlis. Majlis talking about the withdrawing from the NPT. Yeah. Now, a withdrawal from the NPT would be interpreted and seen by Donald Trump as evidence that Iran's going to build a nuclear weapon, which then might precipitate more attacks by the United States and Israel, which, maybe that's what Iran wants to suck them back in for the simple, again, Iran's being attacked. That's why I don't see Iran going now out on the offensive, because Iran has enjoyed a lot of global support by being the victim, not the aggressor.
Yeah. He said, he didn't say that he's going to go on offensive out of the blue. He said that if they do something against us, we're going to hit the target in their countries. Before doing this, we're not going to attack anybody. He said that. Even he said we're going to negotiate with them before attacking them. We're going to warn them. We're going to talk with them. You're not going to cooperate with the United States. You're cooperating. It means that we're going to do this and that. And then after warning them, we're going to hit them. He didn't say that he's going to go out and hit the targets in these countries. I think the other point, Larry, that he mentioned that is related to what you pointed out is that the NPT. He said, what is the NPT? We were part of the NPT. We were part of all these protocols, international sort of treaties. But after all, we got attacked by the United States and Israel. He said the Iranian nuclear program was, it's the most inspected program in the world. No country had more inspectors on its territory more than Iran. So basically, he's mentioning that the NPT is just losing its importance.
Well, what the Iran played, let's call it the international-based rules order game. When they signed the NPT, they were making a declaration, okay, we're pursuing peaceful nuclear programs, not military. And with that should have been the guarantee that they'd never be attacked by a nuclear power, because by virtue of signing the NPT, abiding by the NPT, they weren't going to be considered a threat. And now they've seen that despite signing the NPT, it's not buying them protection, and it's not allowing them to do the peaceful development of nuclear power. Therefore, I can see them saying, okay, screw it, we're backing out of this. There's nothing to be gained by it. So I understand the reasoning.
Yeah. Let's assume that Donald Trump doesn't get anything, which in my opinion, the economic war is not going to bring Iranians to their knees. And
well, we keep looking at Iran in time slices. So we're focused now on today, current. But compare it to 10 years ago, when they were under full sanctions, not just by the West, but by Russia and China. So are you telling me that Iran's economy, when they were under full sanctions 10 years ago, was stronger? That they were selling more oil then? That they had a bigger trade exchange with other countries? I don't think that's the case. Now, I don't have the actual numbers to draw upon, so I'm just using a little bit of logic here. Today, they've got free trade, open trade with Russia, with China, who's the largest trading partner, with Pakistan, also with Turkey. They have an important trade relationship with Turkey, of all places, and with the Europeans in terms of the oil and gas, which Europe needs so desperately.
Today, Professor Steve Hanke said in the region, there are two countries that they were experiencing an increase in their GDP in the last 10 years. The first is Iran, and followed by Saudi Arabia. All other countries in the region, their GDP has been reducing in the last 10 years. And it shows that the logic that you just mentioned, it resonates with the reality of what has happened. So there is no way right now, the Iranian connection to China, I don't know if the United States can do something about it. Do you think, are they going to attack?
What could they do? Threaten China? Hello? China's got the United States by the balls. They'll make Donald Trump sing soprano. And without, their control over the rare earth minerals already cripples the United States. And China has shifted its trade pattern away from the United States to the global South. The United States thought, oh, we're such an important customer, they can't live without us. Chinese said, the hell we can't, watch us. And that's exactly what they're doing right now, living without us.
Yeah, because there are two ways of putting pressure. If they want to do that, it's basically against China and Russia. because these are the two main partners of Iran right now when it comes to the oil and when it comes to the other wheat and maybe seed oil, something like that Iran is importing from Russia as well. So if they want to do something, they may use Ukrainians. I don't know if they're going to go that far to have some sort of attacks in the Caspian Sea.
Okay, if who wants to do the United States?
The United States maybe
would use the Ukrainians how?
Yeah, in the Caspian Sea to attack the ships or whatever is going on between Iran and Russia.
Yeah, I think the Ukrainians got other problems on their hands right now. I mean, they can't handle Russia. They don't have surplus troops, weapons, resources to go out trying to stir something up with Iran. And already, Russia's got an additional 50,000 North Korean troops, and they're getting, this is like a military training exercise for them, except it's live fire. And they have to use real world tactics on real world threats. So, I think that's going to keep Ukraine so preoccupied, they won't have time to worry about Iran.
So, how about the railway between Iran and China? Because it goes
it's open, right?
It's open, yeah.
U.S. tried to blow some of it up. They destroyed it temporarily, got rebuilt real quick, and the trade continues.
That part it was inside Iran. I don't know if they're going to be able to do something outside of Iran. It's going to
be go outside of attack another country. I don't even think Trump's that crazy. But he's going to attack Tajikistan. And I think part of the railroad runs, I guess it runs, I'm not sure if it runs through northern Afghanistan or not, or is that Uzbekistan?
Yeah, it goes from the northern part of Iran. The railway goes to Turkmenistan, then goes to China, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just the rail between Iran and let me just check it out here. Bring the map here. It's better for us to, yeah.
It goes through Turkey. So I guess it goes to Turkmenistan, then Tajikistan, and then into China.
Yeah. Here is the map, Larry. You see, it goes, Turkmenistan and
Uzbekistan. Is that Uzbekistan?
Exactly.
Kazakhstan.
Yeah,
so it runs right along the border. Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan.
And then goes to China, exactly. It goes through 1, 2, 3 countries. It's all connected, to the northern part of Iran, and then goes to China. So if the United States wants to do something, it's going to be inside Iran or outside of Iran in one of these countries that you've mentioned. Maybe it's going to be so crazy if they do that.
That'd be an interesting train ride, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's the world, Larry, is somehow not only changing, is reshaping, is regrouping. Look at all these railways, the new connections that are happening, North-South corridor between Iran and Russia, and then Belt and Road initiatives. They're redefining themselves. Even the new pipeline, it goes from Iraq to Syria, Turkey. It's all about the new design of the region and how that part of the world is reshaping itself, the whole Eurasia, I would argue.
Well, look, you can make the argument that the Now, all the stands previously part of the Soviet Union. So now independent of Russia, but for the most part, they have good relations with Russia, I believe. With people like Azerbaijan being an exception, and Armenia, which the West has targeted them specifically to go after Russia. But China also has been very, very aggressive with its Belt and Road Initiative to develop what are beneficial commercial relationships with all of these countries. Instead of exploiting them, with the typical Western model is we're going to come in and we're going to create these mines. We'll pay people the pittance, nothing what the work is worth. We'll take the wealth out of the country, and then all the money that's made is made on the outside, not in those countries. And that's one of the things that we've seen is taking place now in Africa, particularly the Sahel. That China comes in and says, no, that's going to stop. And they put it in a place a new economic model where the local government ends up profiting, making money.
Yeah. The difficulty the United States has in that part, in the Central Asia, in Eurasia, is that the major economic partner of most of those countries is China. So you see the leverage, how is that going to work? And
well, that's the thing. The U.S. doesn't have leverage, and it's in the process of losing leverage, losing status, and it's no longer as essential as it once was.
Larry, here in Latin America, I would argue, here in Brazil, the trade between Brazil and China is more important than what they have with the United States.
Oh, well, has China threatened Brazil with sanctions and tariffs?
China is seeking a better relationship.
Has the United States threatened Brazil with sanctions and tariffs? Yes. I mean, the United States has said that.
In July, they put 25% of tariffs on the Brazilian economy, Larry. It was in July.
And so what's the incentive for Brazil to continue doing business with the United States? Tell the United States, hey, we don't need you. China's got a big and growing market. They've got a big and growing middle class now. It's not there where the country was incredibly poor and couldn't afford. Now they can afford things, and the middle class lifestyle and the acquisition is going on. It's they're going to replace the United States as the number one consumer nation in the world, as well as the number one economy.
Canada today, the Prime Minister of Canada said Canada is at war in a trade battle with the United States after suspending negotiations and rejecting, what he called a bad deal. And this is, the Trump administration, the United States under the Trump administration is basically doing everything that Donald Trump was criticizing before being elected.
Well, just look at the list of countries he's, going to war with, insulting, threatening. You got Greenland, Denmark, South Korea. Now anybody that's doing business with Iran are getting threatened. There's not a good policy. You keep pissing people off and making them angry. And then, same with what they're doing with Brazil, and now with Canada. Canada's okay, fine. We'll focus our trade on China. We'll shift away from the United States, and it will hurt the United States more than it hurts Canada, I believe.
Do you see the moment that Canada finds China more, I would say, a better partner economically
Yeah,
than the
wow.
United States? Do you see that moment coming?
Yeah. No, I think we're already there. Again, is China threatening Canada with these tariffs? No. And so, we'll see. I'm not sure how. I have to do an analysis to look at the products that are being sanctioned by the United States to see, is there a demand for those products in China? If there is, then China becomes an alternative and the United States loses out. Particularly they could do it with oil. So right now they have shifted some of their sales in oil to China, but it's still a small amount compared to what they sell to the United States.
Because the pressure they're putting right now on Canada is 50% tariffs on the 20 billion of Canadian exports.
Right.
This is they're going to crush their economy. They can the Canada's economy. And how is that going to, I don't know how does he feel that he's going to get something positive out of these sort of policies, because Canada and Mexico are two important countries. And he was talking about the Monroe Doctrine, the West, the latest national security strategy, the document I'm talking about. It was all about Monroe, and they somehow call it Donroe Doctrine, which is coming to the Western Hemisphere, making some sort of unity in the Western Hemisphere. But nothing of that sort is happening as we talk.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it was, Trump said this, we got a good relationship with the Canadians. We put this tariffs on hold. We're going to talk, and it blew up.
Going to the Far East, Larry, Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu said that he's not going to let any Palestinian state, to come into existence as long as he's the prime minister of Israel, because he says that it would be controlled by Iran. I don't know how is that possible to, the Palestinian state being controlled by Iranians? But he's mentioning that as one of his logics, and he's understanding that if they establish a new state in Gaza and in the West Bank, that's going to be controlled by Iran.
Yeah, no, it's just scare tactics. That's all. When you don't have a policy and you don't have any effective tools for leverage or pressure, you're left with creating false narratives and lies. That's what Trump is doing right now.
Are we? How about the other candidates in Israel, Larry? Is that a global decision on the part of Israelis, or it's just related to Likud party and maybe the far right parties?
Well, it is what?
The state of Palestine.
Yeah, well, no, I think is a unanimous position of all. That's I've said all along. If Netanyahu is not reelected, it's not going to change Israel's policy towards Gaza, the West Bank, and the Palestinians. It'll remain the same.
Vladimir Putin today said that Zelensky is opening or has opened the Pandora's box, and there would be new escalations in the case of Ukraine. And I assume the two administrations, the Iranians and Russians, are getting to the point that there would be no peace with the United States, or they're not going to get anything important from the United States as long as Donald Trump is in office. And
Yeah.
What is your understanding of that and the way that these two countries are watching the ongoing war with the United States?
Well, has the United States provided any incentive for them to draw closer to the United States? Or is the United States using threats to try to coerce, coerce their behavior to do what the United States wants? I think it's the former. I think this is just further alienating these countries and creating more and more incentive for them to work outside of the U.S. petrodollar and go other places.
Who's going to be the, because when you talk about the petrodollar, you have to have a stable foundation for that. A stable foundation means that you have countries with a viable economy, with an active economy and growing economy, like Saudi Arabia. These countries were part of that since day one of the petrodollar concept. And right now, all these countries are under tremendous pressure because of the war. And Europe is not as good as it was before. Comparing Europe today, what it was before the war in Ukraine started. These are allies of the United States. These are, when you talk about the United States, you see the links between the United States and Europeans, the links between the United States and GCC countries. It's not an isolated country. These communications were so important, but those communications or these countries are weakening as an outcome of these two wars in Ukraine and in the West Asia.
Well, at least the relationship with the United States is weakening. And again, what incentives is the United States putting out there for these countries to willingly cooperate with us? I would argue none. The United States is relying upon threats and trying to use economic leverage over these countries, which at a minimum creates resentment and even a desire for revenge, a desire to not cooperate with the United States and find alternatives to that economic relationship.
Is that going to, Larry, what happened so far in the Persian Gulf? And is that going to influence the petrodollar? And how influential that is to the power of petrodollar in a long run?
Yeah, what do you mean, though?
I mean that if Saudi Arabia goes down, if the war continues, if they're losing their capability to export oil, gas, and whatever they have, how is that going to be helpful for the power of dollar in the global market?
Yeah, no, it's been the dollar is losing its power, losing its appeal. I think, as we mentioned yesterday, the central banks are holding reserves. They're now holding more gold reserves than dollar reserves, which is a change. I'm not sure when was the last time that happened.
The new reality is not, I don't know, maybe because the empires are behaving this way and they're not going to admit any sort of defeat, because if you accept that you've been defeated, you're going to find a solution for that. But when you don't accept that, it means that you're going to double down. This is what the United States is doing, in my eyes.
Well, yeah, doubling down on a losing hand. I wrote extensively, last night about Besant working at cross purposes with himself. Trying to weaponize the dollar, but the more he weaponizes the dollar, the more foreign opposition to the United States he creates, which means those countries are less likely to buy U.S. dollars and more likely to buy gold.
China is reducing, or is selling the American, the bonds and the treasuries that they bought from the United States. And I don't know how much of their investment in the United States is reducing. Is it significant? Is it somehow, is it
You mean
visible
China's investment in the United States?
in the United States? Because
I don't think that they're embarked on a massive investment program in the United States. As they keep continuing to buy property and to get control, get some sort of control or deep relationship with certain segments of the
universities.
US. Yeah, well, that's starting to go away. There's more and more for Chinese domestically. What was once prestigious, being a graduate of Harvard or Yale or MIT or Berkeley. The Chinese now have more of an incentive to stay home and go to their top universities. Because you're much more likely to land a job in China than if you come back with a Western degree.
Is the leadership, Larry, learning from what has happened with the Trump administration and with the Biden administration? I'm talking about the establishment in the United States. Do you see any sort of sign that they're learning from the mistakes of the two administrations? The two administrations, the Biden and the...
Who, the United States learning or China learning?
I'm talking about the establishment in the United States learning from the mistakes of the Biden administration and then the Trump administration.
Yeah, they're not learning a damn thing.
Because if that's the case, it means that who's going to be the next president? What would be the policies? Are we going to have the continuous wars in Ukraine and in the West Asia? How is that going to influence the power of dollar in a long run? And the sanctions...
It's weakening the dollar in the long run because the debt's $40 trillion. Your debt is going to add another $1 trillion every 50 days. So, we'll see another trillion probably by the end of, let's see right now, September. So probably by the middle to the end of October, another $1 trillion. So the U.S. debt situation is going to keep worsening with each passing day.
Yes. Yeah. Let me just check it out. I wanted to, before finalizing this talk today, Larry, the other point that I wanted to ask you is the case of Lebanon and Syria. The two countries are somehow related to each other because of the, because of the war, because Israel at the same time is attacking both of them. We had multiple attacks today being reported in Al-Mansuri in the southern part of Lebanon as well. And how do you see the policies of the Turkish government in vis-a-vis Lebanon?
Well, the Turks are going to continue to try to assert, hey, we have the right to be, to influence and try to help keep groups that are opposed, particularly the Kurds, contain them, and at the same time try to strengthen ties with between Turkey and Syria in particular. And when doing that, it puts Syria potentially in a stronger position. So I think the collision with Israel is almost inevitable now.
Did you watch Tom Barak? Today he had a new interview, in which the way he's talking about Israel, it seems that we know better what's going on than Tom Barak, who who has,
Well,
who is
he's an ambassador. He's playing the role of a diplomat. Diplomats are people who paid in life in the country.
the way he was talking about Israel. He said Israel is so smart, the way they're thinking, they're doing this, and Mossad is so powerful. And what has Mossad done so far that is so powerful, is so smart? What is that smart about Israel?
Well, not smart, but they've run an effective propaganda campaign to make themselves appear more powerful than they really are. They've actually got some deep-seated problems, which is why you've had such a complete shakeup at the top of Mossad. And again, it's a politicization of intelligence. We face that problem here in the United States, and we're now facing that problem with respect to Mossad.
Thank you so much, Larry.
All right, my friend.
Great pleasure as always, and have a great
economic blockade against Iran, dealing a massive. Tonight, China has just completely shattered Donald Trump's plans for an economic blockade against Iran, dealing a massive blow to America's global standing. Iranian Foreign Minister Syed Abbas Araghchi was quick to deliver a brutal reality check, reminding Trump that Barack Obama tried the exact same so-called crippling blockade 14 years ago, only to be forced back to the negotiating table. But that's not the only bombshell breaking tonight. An explosive new ITV News investigations in the UK has exposed how the UAE hired an Israeli-Hungarian mercenary to run a covert assassination plot against a prominent Muslim academic right here on the British soil. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the Houthis have unleashed advanced new drone technology, striking targets deep inside Saudi territory. This will be the broad focus of my video tonight. Also in this video, a look at the spectacular collapse of Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Graham, whose complete ignorance on international relations during a recent debate has left her facing certain defeat in her Senate race. So please stay tuned. High-stakes economic D-Day campaign by the deranged occupant of the White House against Iran is rapidly disintegrating into a historic diplomatic disaster. Instead of isolating Iran, Trump has managed to isolate the United States, locking his administration into a humiliating, never-ending cycle of public snubs. The ultimate rebuke just came from Beijing. The Chinese government completely shredded Washington's playbook, forcefully rejecting Trump's sanctions as flat-out illegal. China, which buys over 80% of Iran's oil, openly declared that pressure does not help resolve the problem and refused to abandon Tehran. Listen to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, translation and voiceover done by 15-year-old Ruefi.
Sanctions and pressure will not help resolve the issue. China calls on all relevant parties to take responsible measures and resolve the problem through political and diplomatic means. China opposes illegal unilateral sanctions that have no basis in international law and are not authorized by the UN Security Council.
And China isn't alone in handing Trump this humiliating defeat. This follows South Korea's refusal to comply. This is how Trump had reacted when South Korea refused to join America against Iran.
Very nice, actually. But I called him. I said, would you like to give us a little hand? We don't need help with Iran, but if you'd like, give us a hand with Iran. He said, no, thanks. And I said, wait a minute. We have 39,000 soldiers over there guarding you from Kim Jong-un, your next door neighbor, and you're not going to help us on a very easy military operation in Iran? That's strange. No, we'd rather not get involved. I say, well, why are we involved in helping you? So, and I want to help them, but you know, when you ask somebody, would you like to give us a hand? And they say, no, thanks. And then we're guarding them from a country and paying ourselves billions of, it's costing us billions and billions of dollars to protect.
And now the rebellion is spreading into Europe. Spain and other key European nations are signaling that they too have no intention of cutting off their energy supplies just to satisfy the ego of a delusional fool from the White House. By threatening the so-called tremendous economic consequences against the entire world, Trump has overplayed his hand and exposed the severe limits of US leverage. The global community is openly defying Washington's diktat, leaving Trump's foreign policy exposed, toothless, and deeply embarrassed on the world stage. Trump's deputy, J.D. Vance, too, was asked if he knew just how long Iran can survive these latest sanctions. His answer was like, well, that's not important. And this is a guy who aspires to become the president of the US.
Sir, realistically, and just real quick before I let you go, how long do you think Iran can survive with these economic pressures on them?
You know, it's always tough to predict that, and that's honestly not really our focus. They're under a ton of pressure. That pressure is conducive to our goal of ensuring they don't have a nuclear weapon. Whether they can survive a couple of weeks or a couple of months or possibly longer, so long as they don't have a nuclear weapon, that's what we're focused on. That's what the president, frankly, has already accomplished. We're just trying to ensure they don't try to rebuild that program, and that's going to require some consistent engagement. But again, if you look at just where this is today versus a few months ago, oil has come down substantially. Gas prices are down about 50 cents from their peak. We have shown an ability to do something amazing for our national security while also doing something that protects the economic interests of the American people.
Clip. Iran knows Israeli slave Trump's weaknesses. No weapons, rapidly falling approval ratings ahead of November's midterm polls, and rising fuel costs hitting average Americans. Trump simply doesn't have any cards left against Iran. Iranian Foreign Minister Syed Abbas Araghchi quoted a tweet of Barack Obama from 2012 when Israeli lapdog Biden had also made a similar claim about crippling Iran with sanctions. Araghchi wrote, and I quote, 14 years ago, most crippling sanctions in history failed. 8 years ago, maximum pressure failed. 5 months ago, unconditional surrender failed. Today, most crushing economic operation ever, bound to fail. We have seen this move before. Same bull, different bullies. End quote. BBC's international editor, Jeremy Bowen, kind of agrees.
I think that this is more frustration in the Trump administration about the fact that they are struggling to find a way out of this war, and that Iran is not taking any of the potential exits from it. For example, that almost no longer relevant memorandum of understanding a couple of months ago. And so I think that where they're at the moment is that Iran knows that the Americans don't want to go back to war. They know that there are elections coming, and they are as well aware as anybody of those in America who have said very specifically that they're running out of the kind of weapons that they need to protect their forces if they go back to war. In other words, the interceptors, because they burned through so many of them. So I think Iran at the moment will be thinking, yeah, this is a lot, this is pressure, but we can deal with it.
And it still controls the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, that is enormous leverage. That impacts all of us financially.
Yeah, and that's leverage that Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu gave them by going to war. The leverage was always there because people could see how narrow it was and could see where Iran was right next to it. But under the supreme leader, the former supreme leader who was killed on the first day of the war by the Israelis, he was a cautious, elderly man who, while being aware of these potential weapons, didn't necessarily want to use them. As far as the younger guys who are now running Iran are concerned, many from the IRGC, the revolution, the Guard Corps, what's happening is that they don't have that caution. They have all the ideology, but they don't have that kind of caution. They believe they're in an existential fight, so they're using the Strait of Hormuz, and it's a great weapon for them, and it was open until the US and Israel went to war with them.
Now I want you to take a look at this video. Just look closely at this footage, representing everything evil about the current German society.
What was your reaction when you heard a serving Israeli cabinet member, calling for 30 to 40 people to be killed in Gaza every night?
I wouldn't say it's nothing new, but you also have to see the context. He has been questioned by a hostage, and this is also the context of his, request for the death penalty. The idea that people get away without being punished.
It was a bit beyond that. This particular comment. I mean, he also talked about how he believed that these people were not worthy of life. Rhetoric like this. To what extent do you see this dehumanizing Palestinians and further undermining civilian protection?
Well, there's a process of dehumanization ongoing since the 7th of October. And the biggest act of dehumanization is the 7th of October. Babies have been burned, women have been raped, and people have held hostage, starved for more than 700 days. So, there's a history of dehumanization, which was, started by the attack of 7th of October. So we have to put this into the context, which I don't want to justify it, but it makes it unacceptable until the very day. And I think also, to eliminate individuals is for us in Europe unacceptable, but just another context. We know the assassination of Osama bin Laden. And so it is the way how you deal with terrorists who do not want to disarm, who do not want to, negotiate, who do not want to have a political solution. It's a difficult one.
The woman who you just watched is German MEP, Hildegard Bentil. Watch her face. Watch the facial expression as she sits there effortlessly justifying the genocidal rhetoric of Israeli terrorist Ben Gvir. There is a cold, chilling disconnect in this woman's eyes, a smirk of absolute indifference while defending words that openly dehumanize millions of Palestinians trapped in a living hell. The mask of European civilization hasn't just slipped, it has been completely shattered. Let's talk about Germany. For decades, the German state has lectured the world on human rights, historical guilt, and the sacred vow of never again. We were told they learned their lesson. We were told they understood the ultimate cost of state-sponsored dehumanization. But look at where they stand today. History is repeating itself in the most grotesque way possible. And Germany is actively choosing to be on the wrong side of it again. How does a nation go from professing eternal shame over its past to actively enabling, defending, and financing the erasure of Gaza? Let's call it what it is. Then it was Nazi Germany orchestrating a horror that scarred humanity forever. Today, it is the Gaza Holocaust, And official Germany is not a bystander, it is an active participant. When politicians like Hildegard Bentil use their platforms to sanitize genocidal chants, they are nodding along to the destruction of an entire people. They aren't just failing to stop it, they are legitimizing it. The moral superiority is gone. The lectures are over. The world sees the hypocrisy, and history will record every single word, every smirk, and every justification. Meanwhile, tonight, Yemen is on the absolute brink of exploding into total civil war, and the fallout is hitting the global economy right now. But the Ansarullah fighters, also known as the Houthis, are striking back hard, and they are crossing borders. Houthi spokesperson Brigadier General Yahya Sari just announced explosive drone strikes inside Saudi Arabia, directly hitting Najran airport and a major Saudi Aramco oil facility. Meanwhile, the human and economic toll is catastrophic. Following relentless Houthi missile strikes, the critical Red Sea port of Mocha has officially shut down all operations, because Houthi attacks on Mocha port forced it to suspend operations, leaving workers jobless. Trade is paralyzed, and thousands of workers have been thrown into unemployment overnight. The UN is warning that Yemen is being sucked into a dangerous regional quagmire. This isn't just a localized conflict anymore. It's a global energy and shipping crisis waiting to happen. Elsewhere in the UK, an explosive investigation by ITV News has laid bare the rogue status of the UAE, revealing that the Gulf regime hired a Western mercenary to conduct a covert surveillance operation against British citizen Anas al-Tikriti on UK soil. The damning report details how Abraham Golan, a dual Hungarian-Israeli citizen running the private security firm Spear Operations Group, was paid a six-figure sum and millions in bonuses by Abu Dhabi. Golan, who previously bragged about running a UAE-sanctioned targeted assassination program in Yemen, tracked al-Tikriti's home, office, and local mosque attendance in London, while colleagues openly discussed an objective to potentially kill the British academic. By deploying contract killers into the heart of a Western democracy to stalk an asset of the Cordoba Foundation, a think tank the UAE unilaterally blacklisted, despite British intelligence finding zero evidence of wrongdoing. The regime, I'm talking about the UAE regime, has demonstrated an absolute contempt and disdain for international law and state sovereignty. This operation marks a terrifying escalation in transnational repression, proving that Abu Dhabi views the streets of London not as foreign soil, but as an unrestricted playground for extrajudicial violence. This latest scandal cannot be viewed in isolation. It is a logical extension of a regime that has spent years using its vast wealth to subvert democratic institutions and demonize Muslim civil society. We know how the UAE funded the genocide in Sudan. This rogue Gulf regime has been waging a war on Islam and Muslims for years. Remember the Abu Dhabi secrets investigation, which exposed how the UAE transferred millions of euros to the Swiss private intelligence firm, Alp Services, to run aggressive covert influence operations across 18 European countries. The explicit goals of the state-sponsored Islamophobia campaign were to, number one, undermine an entire religion by systematically framing ordinary European Muslims as internal threats. And number two, circulate fabricated allegations to strong-arm European authorities into shutting down mosques, charities, and community spaces. And three, mass-produce smear campaigns that ruined the reputations of hundreds of innocent activists, academics, and organizations by falsely linking them to extremism. Listen to al-Tikriti himself.
My expectation of my own government is far better. Knowing what we all know about the UAE regime, we wouldn't put it past that regime to carry out this crime. And this would be nothing on the scale
the Trump regime caught in the act covering up casualties in the catastrophic and unlawful war in Iran. We are now finding out that 60 more service members were injured in the catastrophic and unlawful war in Iran, bringing the total dead and injured to 775. We are also learning that 8 individuals were killed in a plane crash at a remote Alaskan military site. The Air Force was forced to admit this, although they provided very little information about what actually happened at this remote Alaskan military site. And you'll recall earlier this month, Wired reported that it appeared that the U.S. military accidentally killed everybody on board a civilian medevac flight in New Mexico as the Army was testing out new equipment, new GPS jamming equipment in the area. The Trump regime also continues to cover up its slaughter of little girls, not just in the Manab Elementary School, but also the Lemerd Gym Hall facility. We'll talk about all of this, but it's cover up after cover up with this Trump regime and what they've tragically turned CENTCOM into. And this is why the Trump regime has also fired all of the top level leadership from Stars and Stripes, the main military newspaper. The publisher stated that he was likely going to resign in September because of the fact that the Trump regime was imposing a military chaperone to control all of the reporting in Stars and Stripes. And then in the past 24 to 48 hours, the Trump regime fired the editor-in-chief of Stars and Stripes, the main military newspaper, and also a reporter who just did an incredible expose about how poorly the United States military is treating service members and their family who were stationed in Bahrain, which was hit hard by Iran early in the war. And there are, thousands of military service members and their family that are just utterly displaced right now because they were stationed in Bahrain. There were schools there. There's a whole setup there for military people who are stationed there and their family and their kids. And they're getting utterly ignored right now by the State Department, by Hegseth, who don't want anything to do with them. And they're like, we need to know where we're going to move. We're spending tens of thousands, $40,000, some families are, in relocation costs from Bahrain to other places. Like, where do we go? Where do our kids go to school? Hello, anybody want to, from the Trump regime, want to speak with the service member families? This is in addition, obviously, to the great reporting by Stars and Stripes, Aaron Parnas, who's affiliated with the Midas Touch Network, MS Now, and others regarding the horrific conditions aboard the aircraft carriers in the region as well. Let's just break this all down piece by piece. For months now, I've been saying the Trump regime is covering up casualties. I still believe the 775 casualty number is about 3 to 5x undercounting what it really is. I believe the casualty number is more like 5,000 service members. I'm basing this on the satellite footage that I observed, where I've seen these containerized barracks that were hit hard by Iran. We know that there were service members in and around these barracks. We know that the ballistic missiles from Iran and drones hit. This would obviously, at the very least, cause traumatic brain injury. But previously, the Trump regime has claimed traumatic brain injury as non-injuries, or just very small nothing, is what they've kind of referred to it before. TBIs are very serious things, but I believe they're covering up a lot more injuries. And just think about some of the scheming the Trump regime's done. They basically tried to separate the catastrophic war and claim there have been 2 wars. They say Epic Fury was already won by the Trump regime, and then there was a gap, and then there's another war taking place. So there's been 2 wars so that they can try to lie about the casualty numbers and then avoid having to go and get congressional authorization, which they have to anyway. Look, Donald Trump's a lifelong fraud. He's actually a felon. He's a criminal. Separately, he's a sexual predator. He's a bad guy. He's bankrupted casino after casino, business after business. Before he was involved in politics, the only thing he's good at is lying, for defrauding people, and then blaming people. That's his whole thing. Remember his civil case where he was found civilly liable for fraud in a Manhattan courthouse? The whole thing was he lies about numbers. On one day, he says that the value of Mar-a-Lago is $20 million because he doesn't want to pay property taxes. The next day, he wants to take out a loan. He says it's worth $2 billion, $3 billion to use the asset as a way to take out more money from banks. The guy just makes up numbers. That's his whole thing. He says, we brought in $19 trillion, $21 trillion. Everything's a lie that this guy says. Every sound, syllable, utterance. He's a walking fraud. You just have to know that about him. And that's what I've been saying. He is a horrific human being. Let's take a look, though, at what we learned at the end of this week. The Pentagon adds 60 wounded to Iran war casualty count. A further 60 American service members wounded in the Iran war were added to the Pentagon's count of military casualties in recent days, bringing the total number of service members killed or injured to 775. The number listed as wounded rose from 697 on Wednesday to 757 on Thursday, according to the Defense Department's Defense Casualty Analysis System. The number of deaths purportedly remained unchanged at 18. The Pentagon did not immediately respond at all on Friday to a request for more information from Stars and Stripes, but the Pentagon did fire the publisher, they did fire the editor-in-chief, and did fire one of their top reporters, but did not respond to them regarding the inquiry. And what Stars and Stripes saw is on the system. Remember how I've been assessing that internal system? And I've been saying they're definitely undercounting it. More numbers were just added. More casualties were added. And then it wasn't even addressed. It just added. Because, what CENTCOM was very busy. To be fair, they were very busy trying to manipulate the oil markets on Friday, because that's all this is market manipulation for Donald Trump and his oligarch buds, right? CENTCOM told CENTCOM told CNBC, also CBS separately, but CENTCOM told CNBC that U.S. forces have helped tankers transport over 660 million barrels of crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz since May, at least 7 million barrels per day over the past 3 weeks. Okay, that's all a lie. Every aspect of it is a lie. Why is CENTCOM reaching out to CNBC? I'll tell you why. Because Bessent was running his own market manipulation bond buyback scheme. He was previously doing his Japanese yen bailout manipulation scheme. By the way, the bond buyback scheme, the Japanese yen scheme, both complete and utter failures. So CENTCOM, CNBC, okay, you're the financial channel. This is CENTCOM here. We'd like to tell you that we're actually brought 7 million barrels a day. No, you didn't. We have the satellite footage. We can see what's actually happening. We can see the very large containers, VLCCs. We can see the very large ships. And we know that even when they turn off their transponders, we know that it's not bringing in nearly anywhere near 7 million barrels a day. If it was bringing in all of this oil, if all of this crude was leaving, let's just be simple about it. I'm a simple guy sometimes. Then why would our strategic petroleum reserves be continuing to hit tank bottom and we continue to draw from them and it gets lower to lower? Why would the crack 3-2-1 spreads of diesel be approaching record highs of over $102 a barrel, the price of diesel approaching $200 a barrel, with the price of crude right now around $94 a barrel, which just means for all of us, you're paying on average nationwide $4.15 a gallon, but probably you're paying closer to $6 right now. For diesel, the national average is $5.50, but surely you're probably paying closer to $6.50, $7, perhaps even higher when it comes to diesel. So if all of this oil was coming out, it's supply and demand, baby. It's economics 101. We would be able to know what was actually out there. Supply and demand. Guess what? When you blow things up and you destroy things, Donald, there's less supply. Let's talk about what else is being covered up by the despicable and sickening Trump regime. 8 killed in plane crash at remote Alaskan military site. The Air Force was forced to fess up to. A plane crash at a remote U.S. Air Force site in Alaska has killed all 8 people on board, the U.S. military said. The civilian contracted aircraft crashed shortly after midday local time on Thursday near Cape Newenham, which hosts the airport of long-range radar sites. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers said 2 of its employees were on board. It is unclear who the other passengers were or why they were there, but the U.S. Air Force Alaskan Command Chief said they had been dedicated professionals carrying out a vital mission in a demanding environment. This is a devastating loss for our military family and the communities we serve, Lieutenant General Robert Davis added. Our absolute priority right now is providing unwavering support to their families, friends, and teammates during this devastating time. We are profoundly grateful for the swift and tireless response of our search and recovery professionals. Rescuers who landed near the crash site confirmed there were no survivors, it added. An investigation is underway and the deceased will be named once their next of kin have been informed. The plane was chartered by the USAC, which said on Friday it confirmed 2 of its employees were aboard. Okay. Usually when situations like this happen, the commander in chief would come out with a statement. We would hear from the president. We would hear from the Defense Department. We would hear from some top cabinet official about what was going on, and we, the nation, would understand. Did you even know this happened? If I didn't report on it right now, maybe you heard about it. But the same way when I was doing a report on Friday about the horrific storms in Gary, Indiana, obviously, if you're from the area, you know about those horrible thunderstorms, but 300,000 people were without power. 7 people died in Northwest Indiana, and you don't hear a peep from Donald Trump or really anything coming out of FEMA that's meaningful or material or impactful. It's like in Puerto Rico right now, which Donald Trump has previously said the most heinous things about. I mean, they're rationing water in the United States of America. And again, in normal times, you would have the leader of the United States talk about these things. And he doesn't because he is a sick, disgusting, vile thing. And again, we need to ask if what was happening in Alaska with the jamming issues, is that similar to what happened in New Mexico with the GPS jammers? Futurism ran the following title back on August 3rd of 2026. It appears that the U.S. military accidentally killed everybody on board a civilian medevac flight in New Mexico. This was a statement that the Army released. The Army is aware of the release of the NTSB's preliminary report into the crash of a civilian medical evacuation flight on May 14th in the vicinity of Ruidoso, New Mexico. As the incident remains under investigation, we cannot comment at this time. Okay, it happened May 14th, so you covered it up through August? Just a total cover-up? When the Federal Aviation Administration shut down the air traffic in El Paso Airport, remember that earlier this year? Nobody could have guessed that it was an experimental high-energy laser weapon that was the cause of that. And that same weapon was being used also in New Mexico, where a horrifying incident happened in May, where a small twin-engine medevac aircraft carrying 2 pilots and 2 medical workers departed from Roswell, New Mexico, heading west for the small mountain village of Ruidoso. The crew became the victim of an electronic warfare exercise being conducted at the nearby White Sands Missile Range, a test which rendered their navigation systems inoperable. Everything is a damn cover-up. Stars and Stripes reported on Friday, and then this reporter, Lara Corti, after posting this story, was fired. I'll do a whole other segment on that. Navy families evacuated from Bahrain face uncharted territory amid bureaucratic confusion. Doesn't it always seem bureaucratic confusion with these Trump regime idiots? They can't get food to our aircraft carriers, and they treat our service members and their families like absolute crap everywhere, not just those aboard the ships. And in Bahrain, you had the community of military families that lived there. Their kids went to school there. And the Trump regime had to evacuate everybody because we didn't have the weapons to protect them. Trump and Netanyahu rushed into this war. There was no notice. There was no any thought about the military members and their families who are in the region. Iran prepared for this. They knew exactly where to strike to disrupt American logistics. They probably couldn't fathom, though, just how bad Donald Trump would be and never actually being able to even conceive that you need logistics in war. Yeah, idiot, you need logistics in war. And so basic things have broken down. The military families don't have places to live because they got evacuated. So does anybody at the Defense Department, State Department want to help them find new apartments? Or do they have to go out of pocket for your own incompetence? What about the teachers at the schools? If they ain't getting paid, if they don't have places to live, they got to teach elsewhere. So what happens to the family members of the military kids or the military kids who are there? Where do they go? Where do they go to school? Have you thought about any of this? And they didn't. And you have this horrific story that was reported on before this reporter got fired of these family members who didn't know or still don't know where they should live. They're basically unhoused at this point, and the military's not getting back to them. Now, I've been sharing with you all of this CENTCOM propaganda, and it's been so embarrassing to me, and I think for so many Americans who actually are patriotic and care about our military, that CENTCOM now looks like a Truth Social account. And so CENTCOM would always make these posts. Iran says they control the Strait of Hormuz. False. We control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran claims they struck American military bases and injured people. False. Everybody's fine. And then you know that, like, you learn CENTCOM lied about everything. And then you find out, like, Iran's media, Tasnim and Fars and Mayers, like, were right. And I'm like, what? The Iranians did it right and CENTCOM was the lie. And it happened so many times. And I would see the visuals. I would see the U.S. bases targeted by Iran from, certain dates. This is the map of July 9th to July 24th. I could see the satellite damage. Yet if CENTCOM was like, that didn't happen, I'm like, I know it happens. And again, this is the same CENTCOM right now covering up some horrific war crimes that were committed by the Trump regime in Iran. Obviously, everybody talks about Manab, and rightfully so, where the Trump regime used United States Tomahawks to slaughter 168 little girls, little elementary school girls, slaughtered with United States taxpayer dollars that could have actually gone to helping little girls in the United States get health care, or little boys or little kids or people or adults, anybody actually get health care in the United States. But no, the tax money was given to Trump to do a catastrophic war with Netanyahu to slaughter little girls. I mean, it's so utterly sick. But also, we should not forget about what took place in Le Maire. And the BBC and New York Times did separate analysis showing that in Le Maire, multiple experts show that it was actually a U.S. weapon, a new missile that explode almost like these pellets that spread out over the volleyball gym that these little girls were playing at, and killed 21 people who were practicing volleyball on the first day of the war. Donald Trump still denies it. We're never going to get to the bottom of it, because he's a fraud. He's a con artist. I mean, the United States slaughtered little elementary school girls, and it's sick and it's disgusting. And it brings me so much pain. It really does. It makes me so freaking sad that this is what the country that I live in, does. It's sick stuff. But when Donald Trump's asked, like, we're never going to get to the bottom of it, we'll never know what happened, because you're a con artist and you're a sexual predator and you're a deviant and you're a criminal and you're a horrible, sick human. But if we care about humanity, we need to just acknowledge what the hell happened and figure out what we can do to avoid it. And there's nothing we can do to bring those little girls back. But damn it, have empathy. These are people's lives. These are people's kids. These are real people. This is real life. This isn't a simulation. What the hell are we talking about? Let's play this clip.
Democrats released a letter calling on your administration to unveil the findings of the investigation into a strike that killed more than 100 children on the first day of the war. Will you commit to releasing the findings of this investigation?
Well, I'd have to speak to the generals that are doing because we mostly have generals. I don't think anybody's going to ever be able to say what happened there.
There are images from this site that show fragments that appear to be from U.S. Tomahawk missiles. Is it possible that old intelligence or a mistake during a very active time in the war led to this event?
It is, but it's also possible that those images that you have are AI generated. Now, I know we're waiting for a conclusive report. I don't think there can be a conclusive report.
Will you release the report when it is finished?
I guess so. I mean, I have to ask the military people. There might be a reason why they can't.
During the interview, the president had a very clear message for the Iranian regime. Make a deal or the strikes against Iran will ramp up in the days ahead. He said he is reserving energy targets for the end, but he did not rule out the possibility of a ground operation in the future and talked about how the Iranians at this moment are unwilling to make a deal. Ainsley?
Oh, what a great interview. Congratulations on getting that. You're the perfect person to talk to him about Iran. Thank you so much. All right, let's hand it over to Carly. She has some headlines for us. Hey, Carly.
I do. Yeah. Hey, Ainsley. And this morning, President Trump's.
There you have it, folks. Let me know what you think. I know we covered a lot of ground there. Hit subscribe, pre-order W.
Coffee. Follow me.